Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's District Administration Web Seminar, which is entitled Top 4 Safety Risks and How to Protect Your Students, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsor, Light Systems. Now, before we get started today, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items with you. For technical support, please use the chat panel, which you can find on the right side of your screen. Then select on my name, which is Stephen Blackburn, and then type your message if you're having any technical issues, and I should get to you shortly. If you don't have any computer speakers, or maybe you prefer to listen privately, please dial the phone number and access code that I'll be posting in the chat window in a few moments, so look out for that. We will also be welcoming any questions that you have today. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To submit a question, please use the Q&A panel, which you can find at the bottom right side of your screen. Then send your questions to all panelists. If you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just look to the right side of your screen and then click on the expand triangle, which should be located directly in front of the panel name. Also, something important to note, if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, you'll be pleased to know that everyone who is registered and who is attending today will receive an email with a link to the slide as well as an archive recording. And so today will be a campfire discussion in a Q&A format where I will be asking questions to our panelists here who are all top experts in their respective fields and who will discuss in detail about these top 4 safety risks you all came to talk about today. So with that in mind, I will now hand things over to them so they can introduce themselves. Amy Grosso, would you like to start?
Absolutely. I'm Amy Grosso. I have the honor of being the board chair for the Central Texas chapter of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. AFSP's mission is to save lives and bring hope to those affected by suicide. There's chapters in every state, and you can find information at afsp.org. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also the Director of Behavioral Health Services at Round Rock ISD, which is a district in Texas with about 48,000 students. There I oversee a team of social workers, campus-based mental health centers, and I'm housed within our police department, and we are redefining school policing by really taking behavioral health, making it a serious component. And so I am very glad that I get to do that. And I'm excited for the conversation today.
Perfect. Amy Bennett?
Hey everybody, I am Amy Bennett. I'm the Chief of Staff at Lightspeed Systems. This topic of how to protect students, it's our core mission at Lightspeed. It's what drives us to get up every day. Lightspeed has been helping schools keep students safe for over 20 years. We do it with content filtering and YouTube controls and social media controls, activity reporting, and most recently with our alert product, which is going to come up several times today, I'm sure. What it does is combine AI monitoring of student activity with human review. So we're giving schools alerts and early detection of student violence or students at risk of self-harm. And I too am really excited to be part of this just important conversation.
Perfect. Mike?
Hi, thanks for having me. Mike Bauer here. I work at Amazon Web Services. I lead our EdTech solutions and strategies team, which is really all about serving the thousands and thousands of EdTech organizations that are running their infrastructure on the AWS cloud. And so it's a fun role. My whole background has been in education for now 20 years, and I'm very passionate about what has taken place, especially with the pandemic and what's happening even now in regards to what the data is showing in regards to how we can better protect our students. So though my role is predominantly technical, I am a leader that is trying to give companies like Lightspeed all the tools they need and to make them more efficient and more optimized, like the AI tools that Amy was just now mentioning. We're trying to improve those tools even more and make them more cost effective so we can get them to be used by even more schools and state education agencies in the country and beyond.
Perfect. Thank you. And Rich? Oh, currently muted.
There you go. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rich Westaki, and I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. I retired in 2018 from the Naperville, Illinois Police Department, where I spent 22 years at the High Technology Crimes Unit, as well as the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. My background, I've arrested over 300 predators in my career and continue to do so. I currently work for the Lockport Police Department after my retirement, and I'm the cyber trainer for the National Association of School Resource Officers. My consulting company teaches in schools all over the country. We train students how not to be victims. We train faculty on what to do when there is an alert or if something comes up that they don't know what to do. And then we train faculty. I'm faculty administration on what to do with kids who are involved with sexting, cyberbullying, and things like that. Back a few years ago, I created something called juvenilejusticeonline.org, which we have over 3,200 agents, law enforcement, judges, probation, and mostly school officials giving diversion with restorative justice for things they get in trouble for at school. So we keep really busy, and I am a consultant with Lightspeed. And when things get really notched up with reports and for what schools to do, I am the conduit to law enforcement, and I guide and direct schools on what to do when threats come into their school.
Perfect. Thank you. And again, right before we get started, thanks for all of you for joining us today. Our audience appreciates it. So, all right, let's get started. So this first question is for you, Amy Grosso. So the topic of mental health is really something that's been discussed at greater length now more than ever, especially. So with your work at AFSP, have you seen a positive impact on students by having hard conversations about mental health?
I love this question because, I think because of the pandemic that we as the adults are more open to talking about mental health than we ever have been. When the reality is mental health has been a concern for our students for forever. And the rates of suicide, it being the second leading cause of death for teens, has been trending up for about a decade. So it's not anything new. And a lot of times when we would talk to students before, they would say, please help my parents understand. Please help my parents understand this is real. And so I do think a wonderful thing, if we can say wonderful things that have come out of this last 2 years, is we of the adults have finally gotten on board to realize that mental health in students is of a concern, and we have to do something as the adults to help them. And that we're finally taking it. I don't know if we didn't take it serious before, but I think there was a lot of denial, that could be somebody else's kid, but it's not my kid. And I think COVID sort of even the playing field, that we all were going through a joint experience that was hard. So it seemed okay then that my child was struggling and that we're getting them the help that they need.
Definitely, definitely. So this next question is a follow-up for you, Amy Grosso again. So you started out at Round Rock ISD and right before the pandemic. So in a new role created specifically for behavioral health services. I'm just curious, what drove Round Rock to create this role and what impacts do you feel it's had on the students there?
Yeah, about 5 years ago, we have a student advisory board that had met with superintendent, and they always had a project they did every year. They were the top leaders from middle schools and high schools. And it was 4 or 5 years ago, they said, we're really concerned about the mental health of our peers, and adults won't talk to us about it. And that really started a conversation in our district because it was student-led, right? Students are saying this is what we need. And so from that, started looking at different ways. What do our students need? Which eventually led to the development of this position in behavioral health services. It also came about because when we think of student safety, we often think of like hardening buildings, right? Active shooter drills, all of those things, which are really critical and important. At the same time, I kept saying, we're losing more students to suicide than homicide every year. That's just a given. And we can't ignore suicide. And we have to talk about it as much or even more than an outside threat. And so I think the district really understood that. Our school board was completely on board and really saw the need pre-pandemic of where the mental health concerns were for our students, and realizing that resources aren't always readily available in communities. And so we needed additional support for our students and our families, and then connecting them of where they need to go.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Being proactive, that's always great to hear for sure. Now switching over to Amy Bennett. So I know you do work with an organization currently that works closely with districts to keep students safe online. So what has this organization, been seeing from a student perspective, and how have your teams been supporting districts with these concerns?
Yeah, so we protect over 20 million students right now. So we see a lot of that online activity for students. And first of all, just the amount of time students are spending online has increased. It's been increasing for a while. It increased a lot during the pandemic with online learning, but it continues to stay really high. Kids just spend a lot of their lives on their devices, on their phones, on social media, online. Along with that, though, we have seen really disproportionately an increase in what we would consider concerning activity. Either content being typed, searches being performed, sites they're trying to go to that we're blocking, but things that altogether show an increase in mental health concerns or risk of violence concerns, those sort of things, just on the rise overall. And really, sometimes we even see, like Amy was saying, these kids know they need help or they know their friends need help. And one of the things that we have seen an increase in really related to that is kids on their school devices, knowing they're being monitored, saying, I need help, or I'm worried about my friend, they need help, I'm worried they're going to hurt themselves, using that as sort of a flag to raise that maybe they're not comfortable doing in real life or in the front of the classroom. Again, they're used to being online. So using that even as a tool to raise that hand and get for themselves or their peers the help they need. All of those things just, increasing through the pandemic and beyond.
Perfect. Thanks. And just switching gears a little bit, Amy Bennett again, from a Lightspeed perspective, what do the safety specialists do at Lightspeed, and how does their work support intervention?
Yeah, and Stephen, I totally skipped the second half of your first question, which is what is Lightspeed doing about all of this? First we're monitoring, but that is not enough. So we released an alert product that takes that monitoring and real-time AI and sends notifications to schools when there's one of those risks that I was talking about. But as everyone on this panel and everyone listening in here knows, schools are busy, they're understaffed. There are teacher shortages, counselor shortages, bus driver shortages. They don't have the time and the resources and the personnel to 24/7, 365 look at those alerts. So most recently, we added with that alert product a human review service where our highly trained team of student safety specialists receives those alerts, looks at the context of them, does any additional investigation that might be needed into what did they search for before? What have they done in the couple of minutes since this moment that was concerning? They do that research and then they categorize these alerts based on the level of risk, the severity, and the imminence. And if they hit a high imminent threat alert, they pick up the phone, they call the school right away. And there's a list of emergency contacts, a call tree that they go through one by one till they reach a human person who has been designated as someone who can contact the parents, contact the student, do whatever it needs to be done. So we're providing both the information and the support and resources and extension of those school teams to make it manageable, make it doable 24 hours a day.
Perfect. Thank you. And another follow-up question. This is something I know our audience here is really would be interested in knowing. Can you tell us a little bit about the top concerning behavioral trends that you've been seeing online as students return to school this fall?
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about that is through online learning, through the real lockdown portions of the pandemic and remote schooling from students' homes, everyone was really aware, as Amy pointed out, of students feeling isolated, starting to be concerned about them being depressed. I'm worried about my kids' mental health. We all talked about needing kids to get back to school. But going back to school doesn't just like flip a switch and everything is fine. There was a lot of trauma that was gone through during those 18 months. There was, as Amy pointed out, already rising suicide rates and all of these concerns before that. So now students are back in most cases, but there's social anxiety that goes with that. There's bullying that goes with that. There is learning loss or lack of social development from those years. So, we see kids reflecting all of those different things, suicidal ideation and threats of violence and just concerning activity. All of those things we're seeing trends with, not just because students are back, but in spite of them being back, all those things still happen.
Definitely, definitely. So this next question, this can be for you, Rich, as well as Amy Grosso. We'll start with you, Rich, once I ask it. But how do you suggest parents get involved in maintaining student safety and mental health after school hours on school-issued devices?
So the biggest thing that when I go out and I teach parents is I put on this cop with an attitude type of persona when I first start out, and I'm like, I'm going to tell you parents something that nobody wants to tell you, but I'm here to tell you if you don't like it, you can leave. So here we go. You are responsible for your kid's technology. There, I said it. You see, you're not only responsible for their food, clothing, shelter, and education, you are responsible for their technology. I don't care if Nana, Nonu, Tia, Tiu, Grandma, Grandpa bought them that new device for their birthday. They don't own it. You, as the parent or guardian, allow them to have it until they're 18, unless you're in Oregon. They own nothing. They own nothing. I don't care if they cut grass all summer, babysat all winter to buy their own new iPhone 13. They don't own it. Parents or guardian allow them to have it. The second thing is that there is no such thing as privacy for children. You are responsible for your child. You are responsible for the device. And if your child, if they're involved in deep conversation on their device, and you look at them and you say, who are you talking to, sweetheart? No one, Mom, it's private. Heck no, it's not private. It's a proven medical fact, everyone, that the frontal cortex of their brains are not developed enough to handle what goes on social media. So here is the catch-all when it comes to social networking. So we know across all of the platforms that you have to be 13 years of age in order to have a Snapchat, an Instagram, or a TikTok, right? So what happens is they whine and they complain, I want TikTok, everybody else has TikTok, with all my friends, it's not fair, you let my older brother and sister have TikTok, not fair. Parents give in. And they say, okay, but you better not do anything wrong. So then what happens, they're like, yes, I get to have a Snapchat. So now our 4th and 5th graders, how old are they? 9, 10 years old, right? Our 4th, 5th graders and 6th graders, they put together their Snapchat or their TikTok. When it comes time to put their date of birth in, and let's face it, some of our kids are not the best mathematicians, but I digress. Anyway, so what do? Let's see. I was born in 2011. Do I go up with my date of birth or I go down with my date of birth? Oh, heck with it. I'm just going to put 2000. So when I'm in schools all over the country, I'll ask my students, how many of you put the year of birth of 2000 in your social media because you just wanted to get it, you want to figure it out? I get 70% of your students telling me that they put 2000. Why is that important? How old are they today? 21. Who do you think is going to talk to them? Adults. Who do you think is going to send them inappropriate pictures and videos? Adults. Who do you think is going to send them or ask for inappropriate pictures and videos? Adults, because they're 21. So the conversations that I show parents to have is A, they are responsible for everything that their kid does and have. Number two, we talk something about the golden ticket. The golden ticket process is that I ask parents, how many of you have a technology talk with your kids and it goes something like this? If you do anything bad on your phone, if you do anything bad on social media, if you take bad pictures, if you take bad videos, if you say bad things, you're going to be grounded. I'm taking your phone away. You're not going to hang out with your friends, and the door's going to come off the hinges of your bedroom. If you ever. And parents will admit to that. Well, when you threaten your kids into compliance and they're being sextorted, blackmailed, are they going to come to you, the parent? Nope, they won't. They're just going to handle it with all the experience that they have, right? So it's about parents, training parents, how to have great conversations that are non-threatening and your kids feel comfortable into coming to you and telling you something has happened. Now, let me give you a stat here. Last year, because of COVID, I was in 25 schools across the country, okay? I was usually in Catholic schools and private schools because they were in session. So my message to my students is, no one has the right to make you feel bad about yourself or to make you do something you know you shouldn't be doing. If you are sitting in my class right now, suffering in silence, and someone is doing this to you, because I'm a cybercrimes detective, we can find out who they are and make it stop. Understand, students and parents, that when it comes to social networking or gaming online, no one online is anonymous. We can find out who they are and where they are. So this message I give to my students kind of like empowers them. And out of those 25 schools I had 17 students come forward telling me that they were being sextorted right after my presentation. So I reset my clock, right? September, I started teaching in schools again across the country. I am in my 12th school this week, and I've already had 3 students. One was being inappropriately touched by her grandfather, and 2 are being sextorted by another student in their school. So the empowerment message to parents not to be friends with their kids, to be mentors, and to be in their kids' technology lives. And number 2, empowering kids on not to be victims and showing them what the red flags are that predators use to get them under control.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Amy Grosso, same question. I'll repeat it. How do you suggest parents get involved in maintaining student safety and mental health after school hours on devices that have been issued by their school?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of like Rich said, you have to be willing to have hard conversations if it's technology or if we're dealing with mental health or where technology and mental health come together. I often tell parents, if you're struggling asking your kid if they're having thoughts of suicide, how hard do you think it would be for them to tell you they're having those thoughts if you've never brought it up? And so sometimes as adults, even though it's uncomfortable because we weren't raised to have these conversations, right? We were raised, especially with mental health, to keep it silent. And then technology, we weren't raised with the type of technology we have now. So they're hard conversations and we don't know what to do. So we aren't even willing to start having it. And I always say, we as adults, be it a parent, a teacher, anyone as an adult, we have to be willing to ask those hard questions. And with the technology, I found a resource a few years ago. It's a book by Anna Homayan called Social Media Wellness for helping teens and tweens navigate the social media world and stuff. And a lot of it is guiding parents through how do we help kids be responsible with their online presence. You know, like Rich was saying, if our only message is don't do it, you're doing it wrong, then we're not teaching them. And let's be honest, a lot of the adult examples out there, they're worse than the kid examples. And so I think it's time as adults that we take ownership and we're willing to have those conversations. We're willing to dialogue about it. You know, how many of us, and I'm guilty as a parent, telling my kid, you have so much limited screen time, yet I don't limit myself. And so what examples are we setting? What are we willing to talk about? What are we willing to have engage in those hard conversations? And as Rich was saying, even if we've told them like this isn't best practice, are we a safe person for them to tell if something's happening? especially for middle schoolers. I've done some presentations about technology, and I always use the intent versus impact. And so I would give articles that have happened, right? Like social media gone wrong with kids. And talking about the intent of the student might not have been what happened with the impact, but that we're responsible for both. And I think the more we engage kids in those dialogues instead of just don't do it, but really having conversations, the more they're going to learn and be able to be digitally responsible.
Perfect. Thank you. Now this next question is for both for you and Rich again. So let's see. During the pandemic, and as students have returned to school, what obstacles have you observed districts facing in regards to student safety? Amy Grosso, would you like to start?
Absolutely. There is a lack of mental health resources across the United Nations right now for anyone, but especially for school-age children. Good luck trying to get it in to see a psychiatrist. Therapists have months, like 6 months waiting list. And so I think it's been very hard for schools, even pre-pandemic, of how they help students within the mental health realm, which I feel like goes into that school safety. But even the American Academy of Pediatrics have said, like, we're in a crisis point with mental health for kids. And so I think for schools, they're having to do a heavier lift than they ever have, because honestly, society hasn't done what needs to be done within the mental health realm. And so it's really following a lot on schools to have to be a place to answer everything, right? A kid's hungry, we feed them. A kid doesn't have clothes, we give them clothes. If mental health, now we're expected to provide mental health. And thank goodness, I'm thankful to be at a district where we're able to do that. But I know at smaller districts or other areas of the country that isn't so. And so I think it's just really hard when there's not enough resources for the need.
Definitely. So Rich, same question. What are some obstacles that you have observed districts facing in regards to student safety during and once during the pandemic, and then once students return to school?
Well, our students always strive to have that connection, that social connection with their peers, right? So when they were stranded at home, they didn't have that physical communication with people, so all they had is online communication. But then what we started seeing was that they started to get bored, right? And they played on their games on their devices, or they went to places like Omegle. Okay, now back 10 years ago, Omegle was our nemesis because we would have all kinds of predators dealing with high school and college students. Well, now the high school and college students, now they're turned into junior high students, are going to Omegle. And it says right on there, talk to strangers. And that's what they do. And not only that, we've been seeing a lot more gaming, right? Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, and then they go to Discord. So I belong to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force in Illinois. My partners in New Jersey last year had arrested 24 men who were on Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft and Discord, and they were going after some of these kids who were gaming, okay? And they got caught. Now it happens 50% girls and 50% boys, so there's no really difference. It doesn't happen to more one than the other. And then what happened is that I think there was a built-up, pent-up, not only frustration, but pecking order, I think, when they came back to school, because all the schools that I'm associated with currently that I consult for, we've seen a vast amount of fight clubs, them fighting in parking lots around the school, trying to position themselves, in that pecking order of their school class, which causes a lot of cyberbullying, animosity, physical altercations, and things like that. And across the country, this is what I trained my school resource officers on. Well, it was a fight and there was no victim coming forward, so what do you want me to do? No, when you videotape fights in a bathroom, that is a felony in almost every state. So if you want something to hang your hat on, and these kids are again going into that pecking order, trying to show who's more tougher than the next, and there's fights in the bathrooms, they're videotaping, sending it out. The crime is unauthorized videotaping in a bathroom. You can't do that. So this is what we're giving diversions with restorative justice on. And what really works, if we're looking at solutions, is using that restorative justice model in diversion and having them writing apology letters, having them watching a video, taking a test, doing community service. And then not only do we have the student do these consequences, we're also having the parents put monitoring software on their kids' devices, having the parents watch my documentary or my TEDx, just to give them the information on how to watch their kids more closely when they're doing it, because many of our parents suffer from that deadly disease, right? The Nmk Syndrome, not my kid. And this is where our kids try to do stuff behind their parents' backs. And then what happens is, oh, I had no idea he was doing that. Well, we want to give parents the tools to show them that when they're at home or when they're at school, there are ways. And this is what makes Lightspeed so fantastic with their parent portal, that the parent can sign in and see what their kid has been doing or find out what the alerts are. And including that parent into that process is so important for the mental health and the well-being of our students.
Definitely. And I know you were just talking about the importance of providing tools to the parents. Taking a step further, Rich, can you kind of walk us through some of your intervention strategies?
Sure. So during the pandemic, of course, I wasn't hardly in any. I'm usually in 200 schools in a year. I was only in 25. So what I did was I went into the studio and I recorded all of my presentations, and I recorded them for faculty, for parents, and for students. For the parents, I recorded them both in English and in Spanish, and we're working on a Polish version now because we're in Chicago. And then we have a curriculum, and these videos, these short videos, are anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, and we added tests to them. You can find this at cyberparenting-101.com, cyberparenting-101.com. And what schools have been doing now in this school year is they're having me present either in person or virtually, and then their health teachers or the deans can reinforce. Like if you had a situation where after I presented and there was still cyberbullying going on in one of the schools, the dean or the health teacher or the social workers can say, oh, principal says, can you do a presentation in for that class? Sure, no problem. You go there, you press videos, I don't know, 2, 5, 7, and 8, have a classroom discussion, hand out the quiz, you're done. And now the kids have that message of empowerment and how cyberbullying and sexting and trading their nudes affects one another and their digital footprint. So it's really important to train faculty, students, and parents. But then when the kids get in trouble, it's even more greater. Like in Illinois, we have something called SB 100, where we can no longer suspend or expel kids. They have to do diversion in school. And that's why I created Juvenile Justice Online, is because we can give kids consequence instead of suspending them out of school. They're doing their tasks and their consequences in school, and then they're not suspended, they're not arrested, and it's absolutely fantastic. And our recidivism rate for Juvenile Justice Online, we're just putting all the facts and figures and graphs together. Our recidivism rate is only 15%. So 15% of the kids that go through a diversion that we bring the parents and guardian in and them in, 15% of them will reoffend, but 85% of them won't.
Perfect. Thank you. Amy Grossos, same question. Can you tell us some of your strategies for intervention?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest one with parents too is education for parents. You know, I have to laugh. My dad always said, like, when you have a baby, it doesn't come with a manual, which is true. I say now we have the internet, so there's like 50 gazillion manuals out there. And so I think it's hard for parents to really know what to do in certain situations. And if we hadn't learned about mental health or some of these safety issues or technology, where are we going to find our information? I'll do parent seminars on even like anxiety, and I'm like, don't Google anxiety. because it will produce so much anxiety for you, and you won't know what's accurate information and what's just somebody's blog that isn't really scientific evidence-based. And so I think the more we can put resources, more we do parent sessions. I work closely with our PTA to do parent sessions throughout the year on a variety of different topics, from like social media wellness to suicide prevention. Talk Saves Lives is a suicide prevention training that AFSP can do that does it all across the nation, and it's free, and it's wonderful for parents to learn just basic facts about suicide and mental health. And so I think the more we are able to provide that education for parents so they're not having to search it out for their own. Also, if a kid is in trouble and needing mental health support, do we walk them through what it looks like to find support in your community? Or do we just say, hey, your kid probably needs counseling, which if anybody knows how hard it is to find a counselor and what that's like and searching for it, it can be overwhelming and daunting. And sometimes you just really want to give up. And so I think the more we can walk parents through that, that's, like I said, I oversee a team of social workers, and that's a lot of what they do is they work with the student, but they work with the whole family system. And so, I think sometimes in society right now, we sort of scapegoat our students and our kids that they're all the problem, when honestly, there's a lot of problems with adults right now too. And usually if a kid's struggling, somebody else in the family might be struggling also. So it really is a family systems thing, and how do we support the whole family? So I think the more we're open to that, can provide education, opportunities in a very non-judgmental way, of not judging parents for the way they have done things, but really going with it with an understanding of we're just here to help.
Perfect. And kind of to follow up on that, Rich, I know Amy was just went into good length about how to involve families. So from your perspective, once an at-risk student has been identified, how do you personally involve families in the process?
Well, I think it's so important. Like, for example, when we do diversions on cyberbullying and sexting, we make sure that they see the school social worker or other mental health professional, because what we have found, we've done over 600 diversions over the past 3 years. We have over 3,300 agents using Juvenile Justice Online across the country. And what happened is I get my SROs to report back to me and say, hey, Rich, I had this sexting case. I had this girl on this case. I sent her for mental health counseling by a professional, and it came back that mom's boyfriend was molesting her. Okay, so a lot of times the sexting and the over-sexualized behavior, trading nudes, is just a microcosm what's happening at home. And the only way to understand and get into that situation when kids are being victimized, and then they're doing stuff at school and out of school, and their reputations and stuff like that, is to do that mental health piece, make that part of the diversion, because you never know. Within the same year, I had one from Chino, California, and I had another one from Bridgewater, New Jersey High School, where the boy was taking pictures of his private parts, sending them out to all these girls. And lo and behold, when he got caught and he sent him to the school social worker, he said that mom's boyfriend had been messing with him sexually. So it hadn't been not for the diversion and the school, the SRO, mandating seeing the social worker or another mental health professional, we would never have known, and that abuse would have continued.
Can I add one thing right there too? Because, I think too often we do just see the behavior, and we see the behavior problematic,
Right.
but we don't realize really what's under the surface. So I always view it as it's an iceberg, and then we see the tip top and we think that's it, when really there's so much more. I always say especially for our boys, a lot of times how they're socialized, that they're told they can't cry, they can't show emotion unless it's anger, and so if a boy is experiencing depression or anxiety or even trauma, often what do? They act out. They're irritable, they have anger outbursts, and what happens then is that they get in trouble, but they're not getting the help that they need. And so really understanding what is below the surface, and that behavior is purposeful. And so us as the adults having to really understand what is the purpose of the behavior, and then we can assist.
I would say too on that, Amy, a lot of the activity we see online is some of that below the surface, right? They're they're either typing things that feel aggressive or trying to get to websites that we're blocking as violent, or searching things that have not yet manifested in something that an SRO is going to see on campus. But it's that early detection before it turns into something that is above the surface, that online monitoring can help with that visibility that, as you both point out, is so important.
Just made me think about the preliminary data for 2020 for suicide rates is out. And overall, the rate of suicide did go down for 2020, which most people were very shocked at. But there was one age group that it actually increased pretty significantly, and that was 10 to 14-year-old boys. So even you talking about like the monitoring and trying to figure out what is it, looking for all that violent thing, looking at some of the online thing, are we catching students before it's to a crisis point or before it is into complete suicidal thinking and acting on it?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That was a great conversation there. Amy Bennett, I just want to turn over to you very quickly. I know at one point earlier on, Rich was mentioning, the Lightspeeds parent portal. Can you talk a little bit how that works?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways that we really involve parents, and we are primarily working with school districts. So something like when we're monitoring, when our safety specialists see those high alerts, we are calling the school contacts because we're talking about their technology, their devices, they have implemented the solution. So it typically gets to a point, often on the first call, these school district personnel are very dedicated. So we start down the call tree and they answer really quickly. And then they are the ones who typically reach out to the next step. And often that is the parent. If something's going on in the evening or at night or on the weekends, depending on what it is, as we point out, sometimes the parents are a part of the challenge that the student is facing. But depending on what the situation is, they will be the ones to call the parents. And so, I mean, our partnership with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and a lot of the work we're doing too is providing those schools who are our customers with the tools and the information they can give to the parents. Because now you've got, as Rich and Amy have both pointed out, someone who maybe doesn't know how to talk about this with their kid or doesn't know what to do. So we're giving the schools the tools to give that information and the tools to the parents. Now, our parent portal, I very much agreeing with what Amy and Rich and everyone has said so far. Like, this takes a village, right? Everyone has to be involved in doing their part, and it's the most important thing that we can all be doing. So the parent portal is an extension of all this safety and visibility that I talked about earlier, where schools can provide parents with access to that information about what their kids are doing and when they're doing it, as well as, and this is really important to this idea of safety, as well as the ability for parents to turn off access overnight. Because Rich is nodding because he talks about this, and I know you put a device in a room with a kid, and maybe this is me thinking of my kid, but especially maybe a 10 to 14-year-old boy who will play video games all night. And they will sit there and watch YouTube videos, and it will just keep going. And not only is that not good for their rest and wellness, but it can lead to dangerous activities and dangerous thoughts. They're not thinking as clearly. It's late at night. So in addition to visibility, giving parents that capability to turn the device off and get the student to sleep and off of technology for the night, all of those things and all of those people coming together is really how we can best protect our kids.
One of the things that I teach in my parent presentation is that out of the 300 predators that I've arrested, and when there was an actual victim where I wasn't playing the undercover, we had actual victims, and there was probably 100 of them. The common denominator in all of those was the parent allowed their child to charge their devices in their rooms at night. You see, when you allow your child to charge their device in their rooms at night, you're sleeping. They shut the door so you can't hear them. There's no need to talk. It's typing, reading, and performing. and their inhibitions are lowered. They feel safe in their own bedroom. It's quiet. And this is when predators flourish. You know, and parents need to know those devices need to be charging in the kitchen, in the parents' rooms, in the garage, wherever. You cannot have devices in the rooms at night. Bedrooms are for sleeping.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Rich, this next question is for you. So at district administration, you know, our main audience are district leaders. So what steps can you give to our, you know, the leaders of schools and districts need to take when we receive evidence of a student, you know, who's showing concerning online behavior that may lead to on-site violence?
Sure. So I've had probably 5 shooting threats over this start of this year. And I teach a class called Identifying and Intercepting the School Shooter Through Leakage. And I have also partnered with Tony Pistizzi, who was the incident commander for Parkland. After examining and studying the after action of Parkland, I have resigned myself to, I will do everything that Parkland didn't. And that is my consulting to schools across the country and my SROs. The first thing that you have to understand as administrators is that there are close to 25,000 school resource officers across our country. But did you know that only 6,000 of them are certified to be there? So if you have SROs, you want to make sure you have the highest standard of training for your community in your schools. Okay, in Illinois, I just passed about 3 years ago that the standard of qualification for the SROs in the state of Illinois. They have to be an officer in good standing. They have to be a certified juvenile officer. They have to have NASRO basic and other equitable type of conflict resolution classes in order for them to even be in the schools. Because more times than not, you will have a troubled officer who on the street is troubled and the chief can't put him anywhere. So where does he put him? In the schools. That is the worst place you can put an officer like that. So when I train my resource officers, you guys in the school district have to understand when a threat comes in, okay, law enforcement has a tool called ECPA, the Electronics Communications Privacy Act. And what that says is, if a threat of great bodily harm or death is about to be committed or is being committed now, the resource officer, a law enforcement agent, can enact ECPA, the Exigent Circumstance Statute, and find out who the person, where the threat is coming from in hours. Now, as a school staff, you have to understand that law enforcement has that ability, but they need to be trained in how to do this. And that's why Tony and I go on the road, or I go on the road, and we go all over the place training resource officers what this is and how to do it. I'll give you an example. There was a situation in one of my schools in Oregon, and we had an SRO who had just taken my class. We were keynoting at the Oregon School Resource Officers Conference. He calls me at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's 5 o'clock his time, and 'cause I'm in Chicago. And so he says, Rich, I just want to get this straight. Somebody made a fake Instagram on my principal, and then the next day, the messages came out on the Instagram that he was going to shoot up the school the next day. So, and there was going to be bodies in the hallways and all this other stuff. So he goes, all right, so I did the preservation letter, right? I said, yes, to Instagram, Facebook. Then I upload the questions on the portal. Yeah, and then I answer the questions and I ask for subscriber information, email, telephone numbers, and IPs. Yes, run the IP. Now that came back to Comcast. Do the same thing with Comcast. Within 3 hours, he had that student in custody. So you guys as a school district, whenever these bomb threats, school shooting threats, it is no joke. I don't care how much they say, I was just kidding. What happened in Parkland? When the FBI got these notifications, right? What did they do? Knock on the kid's door. Hey, did you make this threat? Yeah, I was just kidding. Oh, do you mind if we come in and see if you have any weapons in your house? No, you're not going in there. All right, see you later. That was it. The protocols that we put forward is that when we find out who the kid was, there has to be out of school. They have to go for an evaluation. The only true way, ladies and gentlemen, that you will know the intent of that student is that you have a judge or your law enforcement does search warrants on their social media, on their residence, on their cell phones, and you will know their deepest, darkest secrets. So my judges that I train throughout the country, they are doing court orders before that kid is allowed back that a full forensic needs to be done on all those three things: their house, their cell phones, and their computers and their social media. Only until then that's reviewed by law enforcement can they go back into school. So I want to give you guys the tools on what law enforcement can do to make your school safe, and what SROs, why SROs are so important, and why having a trained staff to know exactly what to do. I've been spending a lot of my time at a lot of my schools where these violent fights have been videotaped and put out, and I have perfected a way where when the SRO sends a dissertation or a preservation letter to the social media outlet, and we are requesting those videos being taken down because it's cyberbullying or it's violence, and it's a violation of TOS, meaning terms of service. When we put it in that light and accompany that with a preservation letter, they take down the video immediately. So these are things that you as a school, to protect your reputations, to protect the identity of your students, we do these types of investigations and requests to social media all the time.
Perfect, thanks. Now, before I ask the next questions, I'd just like to just say that we'll probably be, not be able to make it to the Q&A session. That's completely fine. Just still submit your questions to the Q&A, and then after the presentation, then our friends over at Lightspeed will get to your questions. So if you do have any questions, please submit them, and we'll just continue the presentation. So at this point, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, Mike. What feedback or recommendations would you have for districts, starting to explore new ways of protecting their students online?
I mean, this conversation is just fantastic, by the way. I mean, it's so great to hear the perspectives from everyone. I think from the standpoint of what can districts, leaders be doing to continue supporting, and from a technology perspective, it really comes back to demanding better real-time data interoperability, security, and privacy. And there are efforts out there in the education technology realm where this is happening. I would point to an organization, Project Unicorn, as a great starting place for administrators and those procuring tools within schools to go look and make sure, is this vendor like an old school vendor that's been around and has some tech debt and has some it's not real time, or it's not reliable technology? Everything that's been traditionally been built on premise can sometimes be dated. Most of the companies we work with, including Lightspeed, are built in the cloud, right? And so there's so much advantage to from a disaster recovery standpoint, from an availability standpoint, from real-time single-second latency. I mean, we're dealing with life and death here, right? There is no room for error when it comes to those notifications needing to go out, and having higher level services around artificial intelligence and machine learning to do things that it would take humans far longer to do, and to be an aid to educators and an aid to administrators, and frankly to parents as well. I mean, in the pandemic, one of the trends I talk about regularly on different speaking circuits is how we've seen the rise of online student safety and parent engagement inside of the education environment. That's just historic. I mean, learning, just as an example, learning management systems, we're only in about 20 to 22% of schools before the pandemic, and now a learning management system is in 85% of schools, showing the connectivity of how required distance learning and all of the other pieces have had to come to fruition. So the concept of student safety and all the statistics that are being shared here, and I'm just so appreciative. I'm learning as we've kind of gone around here. But if there's anything district leaders can do, it's demand better technology from your vendors. And Lightspeed is an exemplar of an ed tech vendor that is providing those real-time tools and those intervention tools as fast as possible on a secure cloud like Amazon Web Services.
Definitely, thanks. And I'd just like to say really quickly, I just got a comment from one of our audience members saying, that an hour is seriously not enough time to explore these issues, which is another reason why I didn't want to, cut into this conversation, since it's been really inspiring. And with that said, Mike, another question for you. There have been some concerns, about student privacy and how using artificial intelligence as, big brother. What would you say to those who think that? And have you seen AI have positive impacts in regard to student safety?
Absolutely. I mean, not just even in student safety, but in just so many areas. Listen, all technology tools can be used for good or for bad, right? And we've just seen an amazing amount of good that a lot of our customers have used it for, right? Like things like Amazon recognition to be able to do object detection, cameras that are now focused on being able to detect there's a gun in the screen. If there's a gun on site at a school, like red alert, right? Like there should be no question, like, why is there a gun on a campus at a school site, right? There should be just absolutely. So Amazon recognition is one of our AI services, is an example of a tool that has been used for good in object detection. Accessibility, just being able to help visually impaired learners with different tools. Content moderation for inappropriate content use. We have higher level AI services for that many of our ed tech customers and Lightspeed included, able to help monitor those things. I totally get the big brother. I'm a parent, by the way, of 4 daughters, and two of them are 12 and 11 years old, and so all this data is very, very important to me as a parent, and I want and advocating as a parent for better tools inside our schools. But I choose to look at AI as it is a tool that can be used for tremendous good, though I do recognize there are areas that are somewhat predatory in regards to how sometimes advertising data can be leveraged. A lot of us have seen the Social Dilemma documentary, right, in regards to how advertising machine learning algorithms can be set up to really productize a human, and that is a frustration that we're starting to actually work against in some of the AI work that we're doing. I'm not allowed to announce more right now, but we have some tools that are coming out here at re:Invent, our annual conference here in a few weeks, that I think a lot of folks are going to be interested to take advantage of.
Perfect. Now we do have 3 minutes left, and I will like to use this time just to present you guys with a question that did come from our audience. I know a lot of you were talking about how to reach the parents, get them more involved. This question is about what are some strategies are there to reach the parent that is unreachable? Any of you feel free to answer that question.
I feel like this is a lot of the work the team I oversee, the social workers, we get the cases where it is the really hard parents to reach, and how do we invite them in, right, instead of just calling them out? And how do we do home visits, we don't go in accusatory. It's more of how are we helping you? How can we partner with you and encourage them to be a partner? But this is the hardest one, right? I can do a presentation on mental health, and the parents who come, it's great information for them, but the parents who really need it, they're not going to seek it out. And so I think that's always the dilemma, but because of that, we can't quit trying. I think sometimes is it providing information where they can get it anonymously. So if there's some shame or judgment about needing certain information, they can look at a website or things like that. But I think really, how do we form those relationships with them without really wanting something from it, but just to be there with them?
One of the monumental things that I've encountered over the last before the pandemic was parents are really suffering from the Nmk Syndrome. Not my kid, right? They think that since it's not happening in front of them, my kid, and they find themselves saying this out loud in front of their kids. You would never do that, would you, sweetheart? So one of the strategies when we did the the taping of the parent presentations that every month the principals that we deal with will send out just that little video. Hey, we had an incident in school today. We just want you to understand that this is what you can do to prevent this from happening to your son or daughter. So these little videos that our principals are pulling out that we're partnered with, and they're sending it to all the parents, really does help. But I'll tell you a strategy that really blew my mind in one of our high schools. So the Glenbard High School, they have a person who books all their programming, and she's very good at marketing her stuff. So she calls me and she says, Rich, I want to have you in talking about digital footprint and the high school to college athlete, but I'm not going to put your name in this because they're going to think it's an internet safety presentation. So what I did is securing your kid's athletic scholarship. And she went through the coaches, and she told the coaches that if you need to tell your parents, if you want your kid to play in the next game, they must, one or both, show up at this presentation. I had 900 students and parents there. It was amazing. So these are types of things, because every kid wants their kid to play, right? Every parent wants their kid to play. So if you use your coaches in athletics or band and have those alliances to make it mandatory for them to show up to receive this message, and it works beautifully, really.
Definitely. Thank you very much. And with that, I just want to say I did see some questions coming into the Q&A. So even though we don't have time for them today, just know that after today's event, I'm sure that our friends over at Lightspeed will get to you in a timely manner and answer those questions that you have. And again, thank you to all our panelists today. This has been a really great discussion, and I really appreciate it for sure. So with that said, I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us today. For those who really enjoyed our presentation, you'd be pleased to know there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by District Administration, which is the leader in editorial coverage of news, trends, as well as current issues in K through 12. Our wide range of readers here, they subscribe for free to DA, and they stay up to date with us through our print magazine, our newsletters, and web seminars like this one. Also, for those of you who would like to watch this web seminar again, or maybe for those of you who believe that the solutions provided would be helpful to your colleagues, you'll be pleased to know that our team at DA, we will be sending you an email later tomorrow with an on-demand recording of this web seminar. So look out for that. So with that, on behalf of DA, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks everyone, take care, be well, and stay safe. Thank you.